All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today. As we are admitting more people to join, I think we can kick it off for our Tackling SAP Security Together. This is the first event for this year. So as you guys have also joined previous Tackling SAP Security events with NoMonkey, what we do with the Tackling SAP Security Together is address or tackle specific areas in SAP security or SAP cybersecurity, to be precise, whether it is around compliance, whether it is around SAP security baselines, incident response code. We tackle different aspects when it comes to the Tackling SAP Security Together. So for this year, it is primarily going to be bi-monthly. There might be some changes that we do it on a monthly basis to go back to the monthly basis, but for now, it is going to be on a bi-monthly basis where we address different topics. And as you guys have signed up and got to know the different, or at least got to know the topic for today, which is building a robust SAP security framework. And that QR code there takes you to a blog that we have written around that specific area topic. I know as security guys, trust me, this QR code is safe. It is safe. If you don't believe me, run it through different scanners. You should reach that blog for the Building a Robust SAP Security Framework. So without further ado, some of you know me here, some of you don't. My name is Waseem. As you can see from the picture, I think I should change that picture. But I lead the advisory here at NoMonkey, providing different services. Even I'm an author with the Academy to provide also SAP security to cybersecurity teams. So my background comes from a cybersecurity, particularly around SOC, also done penetration testing, also what we do in NoMonkey advisory, penetration testing, SOC enablement, and the different services when it comes to maturing SAP, whether it is around compliance, whether it is around security controls, whether it's around processes, or at least finding gaps in different areas. So hit me up on LinkedIn, happy to chat whenever. Now that you know me, some just housekeeping rules here, or housekeeping to get them out of the way. This session will be recorded. We will be sending it out after our, within the next couple of days. So it will be available on our LinkedIn page. It will be available on our YouTube page. Please ask any questions either during the session, which I will then address at the end, or at the end of the session. And if you want to, of course, follow us to know more of these events, more of what we are doing, as well as NoMonkey to help us also grow, please use that QR code again, trust me, to actually sign up if you don't already follow us on LinkedIn or anything. One of last year's events was quite also interesting alongside the different aspects, because one aspect we did, or one what do you call it, event that we did, or topic we did, was slowing down attackers. While preparing for this presentation, I saw there's a lot of like interconnected topics that we can actually add within this specific robust SAP security framework with slowing down attackers. Now, when it comes to this session that we did, I did with Joris from Security Bridge, also an SAP security professional for many years, also providing a different open source contribution to the OWASP core business application security, which we'll come to. But we saw that this advanced topic also is very good, not just an introductory, but a very good area where you can dig deeper on how you can, for instance, improve your detection, test your detection capabilities with the different aspects that we have discussed, myself and yours. So check it out. It's on YouTube. You can find it on LinkedIn, but you probably have to scroll a lot to find the video, but it is there. If you can't find it, just contact me or contact the chat, and we will definitely send you that link to have a look at it. Our sessions for people that are new, our sessions are around 45 minutes to an hour. Usually we try to reduce that so we could have some questions. But to start kicking it off now, to kick off the subject, a few questions that we want to try to address or ask. Now, some of them are going to be on a very high level. Some of them we're just going to take some examples, but we do want to see some challenges that we see with our customers, with the prospects that we speak to, even if they have different technologies there, even if they have a lot of different people there, there's still a lot of challenges when it comes to SOC, especially when it comes to SAP environments. As you guys know, you work in probably also an SAP perspective, or you work into cybersecurity perspective, you understand that those two different departments do not collaborate on a regular basis. And here is where things need to change, especially when it comes to this area of security or cybersecurity. Now, of course, all other areas definitely needs collaboration, but this particular area, the collaboration that needs to happen due to that skills between SAP and SOC is definitely necessary. So we'll have a look at that. We'll have a look at what are the specific areas we want to consider? How can we, mature those capabilities? What does the response and recovery look like for my SAP environment? Is it even there for my SAP environment? I am planning to do an extensive topic on the response or recovery. So we're going to just align on specific areas around response recovery today, but there is, you can imagine how lengthy this topic is and how far you can actually dive deep into those different areas when it comes to those domains. And of course, finally, who and how should I upskill and in what when it comes to maturing SAP SOC, so maturing, let's say, the monitoring capabilities and response activities around your SAP environments. Some of the objectives that we're going to see, what I like from the beginning is the terrible trio. Some people call them assets. When they do not collaborate together, I call them the terrible trio. So we'll have a look at those. We'll then dive a little bit on how to solve for X. As you guys know from mathematical equations or linear equations, solving for X makes or enables you to make sure that everything is there for you to solve for that. So we want to see how that is done when it comes to SOC. A little idea of how building use cases looks like, what can be missing, what a gap looks like when building those use cases, and finally, quickly looking over respond and recovery, but also reducing our time to respond and our time to recover when we have an incident or a threat that has, let's say, went through the different detection mechanisms that we are implementing in the organization. As you know by now, we will definitely look into those areas. These areas are, each area here can have its own session. So I'm going to try to address them as thorough and, of course, as generic as possible, but they are definitely worth having sessions by themselves. So if you've never seen my slide of SAP security myths, now you get to. I've added actually a new one. So to give you an idea of these SAP security myths and what we usually hear around talking to different professionals, talking to customers, talking to prospects even, what do we hear about SAP security? So identity access management and authorization. It's definitely a big subject. It's not the only thing. We hear that yeah, we do controls, we do IAM, we do segregation of duties. I think we're good here. So this is not the only thing that happens in SAP on how to protect it. This is not the only control. This is definitely one of the major controls, but it's not the only one. So one myth here we're trying to keep on repeating and addressing is that IAM and authorization, while it's a big thing, it's not the only thing. Another thing is that controls or security controls are enforced only on production. Don't forget that you have a lot of staging environments there. So if your development let's say, environment is lack of security, your entire production, if it is properly, if it has been, let's say, exploited or attacked, you can create transports, for instance, to shift to production. So even if your production is 100% controlled, there's nothing 100%, but just saying, there's still that staging environments that can provide with attack vectors towards your production. It's not the only thing here when it comes to that. Another area here is that SAP Basis team takes care of security. As much as SAP Basis team, are reliant on the performance and the operations of SAP systems and the different connections and so on, they still need the support from security teams, whether it is SAP security teams or SAP cybersecurity teams, to help them define those security controls. Think of SAP Basis team here as your IT administrators, where they receive information on patches, vulnerabilities to do on the system from a security team. So try not to put all that pressure or all that guilt of security for your SAP Basis team. They have a lot of things going on, and security might not be on their top priority. Another important one is that your SAP systems are isolated, they're not published. Cool. There's a lot of interconnected systems, there's a lot of interfaces, a lot of third-party add-ons, third-party or custom applications as well that are in your system. So you have interfaces going to your banks, going to your customers, so it is not isolated. It is, yes, not published, but you still have internal threats to think about. You have other third-party threats. You have supply chain risks to still think about when it comes to SAP system or SAP environments. One of my favorites, this was my last SAP security myths, but I did add one new. So it's German-made, it's secured by default. I'm not going to explain more about this, so you guys can get the idea. German-made equals secure by default. So an SAP security myth for you guys. And the final thing is it's in the cloud nowadays. You hear it a lot. It's in the cloud. Responsibilities start to be in the gray zone. We don't know what's happening, or it's in the cloud. We're happy where it is. So still, there's a lot of roles and responsibilities as an organization, even if it's in multiple cloud. Oh, I mean, that's even worse. But even if it's in the cloud, you still have the responsibility to protect your SAP environment. So whichever cloud you want to put it on, it's still your responsibility. All right. After our SAP security myths, going into some of these challenges of SOC when we look at it from different perspectives. We want to look at what I call the terrible trio. Terrible trio consists of, as you guys probably have guessed, people, process, and technology. Now, I'm going to do these challenges in certain scenarios so you could understand how different things work when it comes to SOC and how we try to look at stuff when it comes to maturing SAP security monitoring. We will start resolving these different problems during this presentation, and we'll probably still have a lot of gaps missing, which would require another session. But to give you an idea of the first scenario here is that we can't see anything. There's a SOC team, whether it is an MSSP or it's an internal SOC, you have detection processes there, you have the response strategies, you have playbooks, you have use cases, you have everything in place, but nothing to do with SAP. So you can't actually SAP, and you have your SIM, you have automation, everything is going on inside your enterprise very nicely. You're detecting threats left, right, center, but except the SAP environment. And of course, you have your SAP basis there that, lacks the cyber skills to want to detect or at least put in some controls for that response. So when it comes to detection and response, this does not exist. Now, this is one of the worst scenarios. Like, you don't have anything, you cannot monitor anything. Now, nowadays, this is not an option anymore. So this is, even if you want to go to compliance or regulations or regulatory requirements, this is not an option to have nothing monitoring your SAP environments. Yes, your security audit logs are enabled, but you can't do anything with them if you cannot, detect a proper threat or detect a certain malicious activity that is happening on your SAP systems or around your SAP systems that might affect them. Scenario one. Scenario two is that we can't see enough. So you have your SAP basis team. They are interacting with your SAP security professionals, which is nice. There are certain detection techniques. So you have the technology, you have a specific tool that extracts or aggregates different logs, correlates them to give you some sort of detection that is happening on an SAP system. With that, you send those to your SIM. To some extent, you start to find some ways to correlate them on what is actually happening, and maybe find a way to automate it. So your SOC analysts here are involved, but there's a problem with SOC analysts when it comes to that, is that they lack SAP skills. So they lack understanding what are they looking at if there is no collaboration between those SAP and SOC. And then when it comes to your response strategy, you have lack of cyber skills or lack of skills when it comes to incident response from SAP security professionals. So your SAP security are not SOC analysts, and your SOC analysts are not SAP security professionals. So this gap, I could let you guess by yourself how we can resolve it later. So SAP use cases then take a deep dive. We don't understand what can go on because probably there's not sufficient logs. There's not skills to actually interact, or there's no interaction between those teams to define proper use cases. And that's one of the biggest problems that we see, even if there's actually a tool that enables us to extract logs from an SAP system, whether it's just a connector that dumps into a SIM, or whether it is all of these different tools ranging from Security Bridge to Onapsis to Pathlog to, I can't remember anymore, but there's still a lot of different problems when it comes to finding proper use cases, or at least starting with defining SAP use cases. And our final scenario is that we have everything. Cool. We have the teams collaborating together, the technology is there, incident response won't be there, so you can guess that the lack is still there of skills. The problem here, it comes that a lot of these technology vendors are, what I think this is more of a marketing saying real time. I believe that you cannot achieve real time when it comes to log. While you want to reduce your mean time to detect and mean time to respond, real time is very hard to actually achieve. When we are dumping logs from an SAP system to a centralized area that aggregates logs for us, and then from there we dump it again into a SIM, that real time doesn't actually happen based on experience from previous customers. And if you actually do have any kind of examples that you guys do this, I'd like to hear your thoughts when if you've come across something a little bit next to real time when coming from an SAP environment. That would be interesting to see. As I said, lack of skills are still there. So then what happens here is we get a lot of false positives. We start to, there's no tuning, proper filtering to understand all of these different areas. We don't have the proper playbooks for IR or incident response. So whatever happens, yes, we are detecting, I don't know, critical access or dumping of tables happen, but what is our playbook to actually respond to such an event? So the SAP use cases, as I said before, directly it takes a nosedive, and then finally there's no automation. So your entire area of whether we have everything or we don't have everything, we're still lacking that idea of getting those proper use cases, proper identification, and mature. So how do we solve these problems? We're going to see now, starting, of course, with that framework that we want to build. I know that everything that you have might not be effective. So when we are trying to detect or respond to every threat, in SAP environments, how does that look like? Can we actually achieve that, or we cannot achieve that? With time, absolutely. With the right people, with the right tools, with the right processes, we can definitely achieve a maturity level that we want to reach. But first, we have to define that maturity level. So let's take it back a couple of steps and go to that basics that we were talking, which is solving for X. So as I said, solving for X is nothing new. I just like to use it to define what may be different areas or follow a certain order to get myself to a solution. And I think that's one way of addressing those SAP SOC problems. So to understand, first of all, to understand your gaps. Now, I'm not a big fan of putting quotes, but I think this is a cool quote. You can't defend what you don't know exists. Of course, everyone in security does that or says that. But our first assessment here, let's look into it, is that, first of all, we do want to have a certain assessment, whether it is technical assessment or process, technology, business, people assessment, to understand our gaps, to understand what we have, to understand what we don't have, to understand all of these different aspects of maturing our SOC or maturing our monitoring capabilities and incident response activities when it comes to SAP environments. After that, of course, you can have a clear idea of your strategy by defining that. So where do you want to go? This is where your strategy looks like, okay, I need more people, skilled people here. I want to maybe upskill what people I have. I want to enable the processes that are already there for my detection capabilities into my SAP environment. And finally, I want a tool that can do that for me, but at the same time, the people that I can actually work on that. But I want the tool that can actually do that for me. And after that, which comes the team enablement, whether it is the cybersecurity or the SOC with the different teams here. That's why I put cybersecurity there. So incident response teams, threat hunting teams, SOC teams, and then the SAP teams as well. And finally, the implementation. So implementation is actually the easiest thing if you have those teams, if you have the skills, if you have the understanding, if that you have that collaboration between those different stakeholders to implement those stuff. While it takes time, I'm not saying it's going to take within 1 week or 2 weeks. It takes time, but it is an easy part of that entire process of maturing your SOC. So to summarize this basic graph here, with the assessment, you want to see where you are, what clear understanding of where do you want, or a clear understanding of where your gaps are, where are your strengths, and where are your weaknesses. Based off of that, you will understand where you actually want to go, who are the drivers, or are they capable drivers? I'm not sure why the analogy now is coming to me in my head like cars. But anyway, and how to get there. So how to get there or how to do it when it comes to technical implementation. If we are able to actually ask ourselves or ask the different stakeholders these different questions, we are able to identify a good start for us to mature that SOC enablement. Now, I want to zoom in on the assessments here. I want to zoom in on the process, business, whatever assessment, and then a technical assessment when it comes to that. So I'm pretty sure that you guys came across different standards. We don't need to start from scratch in defining gaps, or at least finding weaknesses or strengths that we have in our company. I'm pretty sure that whoever's here in the call that is in SOC or was leading SOC, or at least works in SOC, has come across the SOC capability maturity model. If yes, it's great. This is mainly used around SOC to understand what maturity a specific SOC has. So it actually is scored on 6 maturity levels. So whether things are existing, whether things are still moving on, across these 5 domains. So you have technology, people, services, business, and process. And based off of that, SOC team leads, or at least in collaboration with the CISO office, they define where their gaps are in those 5 areas. There's a huge, what do you call it? Assessment and some tools that you can actually utilize SOC CCM with to define what your SOC looks like. Now, please bear in mind, this has, right now, this has nothing to do with SAP. I just want to deliver a message, and then we can adapt it to SAP. So these 5 areas actually can look, or the aspects looks like these. Most of these are already done, should be done, let me put it that way, should be done if you have an internal SOC, and should be done definitely if you have some sort of MSSP or external provider that is providing those capabilities. Now, our job here, when it comes to the SAP world, is to adopt this, but to an SAP environment. So one thing to keep in mind is that most of this is already covered. So all we need to do is plug and play those requirements when it comes to the SAP environment. By that way, you are able to work in one aspect with the SOC teams that have already looked into this, have already defined certain technologies. The only additions would be then to relate it to your SAP environment. So it's a good also collaborating platform, I would say, or a model that enables you to collaborate with stakeholders that have done these kinds of exercises. And then you would understand from that perspective what can a SAP security, or at least an SAP SOC maturity look like based on this security maturity, or the SOC capability maturity model. Now, this is from coming from a very high level of how to identify your maturity model. As I said, I want to emphasize on this point, you need to adopt this, or at least one of the models that you prefer working with. I prefer working with this, but adopt it to your SAP environment because it makes stuff easier. You get those then beautiful graphs on where you are standing or whatever, which management loves to see. And of course, CISO likes to see, because it does provide it does provide where you are when it comes to your capabilities. So that's for, following a certain model. What about our technical assessment? So our technical assessment, one way we try to achieve that is actually by looking at different models here. So what do I mean by different models? You guys probably came across threat modeling when it comes to application level. You have threat modeling on a very broader infrastructure level. And that's where you can actually start understanding on a technical aspect what you're also capable of. So we try to define that based on actually attack paths. We have a lot of different attack paths when it comes to SAP. Let's take 2 of these attack paths that you see there in red. Our main area when we are doing these kind of activities is to understand, based off of this attack path that you see in front of you, whether it is actually going from coming from the internal users or coming from outside to internal users, like through, I don't know, spear phishing, some initial technique that has happened that gained access or gained the attacker access to the initial network, and then from there was able to laterally move or do some sort of privilege escalation to actually access the application server. Or you have supply chain risks, which is coming from custom applications or third-party add-ons that are connected probably to your application server and can enable you or have malicious users there as well. So this for us is a gold mine. If we understand attack vectors or attack paths, as we call them, we can derive what we are able to see if we work properly with the SOC team. So if we want to see proper areas, we have to actually have logs coming out of all of these different perspectives or all of these different assets. So whether it is the endpoint here, so think of the user endpoint, whether it is a DLP solution, I don't know, whether it is firewall, web application firewalls, your SAP router, different network components. So it's not just from your application level when it comes to SAP, we need to understand the story when it comes to SOC. That story needs to tell where did an attacker come from, where they went, and where they are at the moment. And are they still here? And that's an important question. Are they still here is an important question, because you have seen recently or throughout the years how many years has attackers stayed in systems without being noticed. So these are important questions when it comes to technical assessments. So a hint here, or not a hint, but something to follow is look into attack vectors, look into attack paths against certain environments, create threat models, infrastructure threat models, or even application threat models, and understand if you are able to see it with your SOC team. Do you have any kind of logs, or you do not have any kind of logs? And to start this conversation, or at least enable that conversation, we want to start by doing this team enablement. And that's one of the biggest parts that I know it's quite a headache. I know that it's very hard to bring people in a room and start, enabling them, or at least upskilling them in the area of SAP, or vice versa, in the area of attack and defend for SAP security professionals. But it is an important area that cannot be missed. So as examples, let's take a few examples from different perspectives. These slides that I'm about to show, myself and one of my one of the contributors, a good friend on the OWASP, we did a presentation in OWASP Frankfurt chapter, and we presented this to a lot of application security people who probably have the same look as some of you guys who are not coming from an SAP side. So this is an attack that has, started with looking into debugging, discovering some sort of RFC connections. From an RFC connection, we figured out that we can change password through some sort of module that we call to a production server, and then we started changing left, right, center on different tables. So that's quite cool. It's still on the application level, but let's see how many logs actually you need from an SAP system to define, or at least to understand this attack vector. So when it comes to getting at least access, you need two different, probably one logs, but you can get a full understanding from the system log or the security audit log, which is SAL. It's called an SAP. Whoever did not see that is not from the SAP world. Read access logs and also security audit logs when it comes to changing of configuration or different RFC connections to understand who accessed what. Is there any configuration changes? When it comes to modules, we have your STAD, you have your security audit logs analysis, you have your user change log, you still need that. And then any kind of vendor change, you will have to go back to your security audit logs, and then probably you can get some stuff from your HTTP logs that are sitting outside of your application server. It might be sitting inside, so depending on your network, or depending on how your network looks. And then finally, change document logs. That's another log that you might require to get a proper understanding. And finally, the outgoing payments or whatever kind of attack, when it comes to that specific area, you need to take it from a different log. Now, and please remember that this is only from the application level. So we haven't even started to understand how this person here or how this actor has gotten into the system, right? So this is what a attack looks like to some extent, but still overwhelming. Which is something from an SAP security perspective, like they would understand these transaction codes, but also these different logs, these amount of logs. There are tools that does these aggregations, but you still need to correlate. You still need to understand how a certain attack works to be able to create an attack path like this. Overwhelming. Anyway, from a SOC perspective, here is a simple security audit log transactions or messages. You could see your IDs here, different transaction codes, and so on. So we have Mr. Rodriguez user was created. So first question a SOC or an analyst would ask is, was that legitimately created? How would they know? There's a process, of course, but that is hidden. What kind of changes happened here? And then after those changes, what the hell are these T codes, or what the hell are these transaction codes? Like what, and then that's it. Then it's shifted. The entire alert is directly shifted to the SAP security guys, who would probably raise it to the authorization team. It'd probably be solved, but the SOC would not have done that. There's no proper, would not have directly communicated on a very shorter time period that, okay, has to go to somewhere in the authorization team to understand if this is legitimate or not, or should I start an incident response plan if there is. So how does this enablement happen? I'm not talking about, making it so difficult. There's this method. It's called keep it super. Well, it's not keep it super simple. It's keep it simple, stupid. But just to be nice and keep it super simple. We do want to try to make stuff as easy as possible. But at the same time, like for a SOC person, for a cybersecurity person, we don't need to go through the details of every single aspect of an SAP system or a technology or so on for them to understand how to detect, how to protect. These fundamental areas are definitely required, or definitely can be provided to the cybersecurity teams, or vice versa, of course, when it comes to attack and defend, as I said previously, to give them an understanding, a general understanding of important concepts. For instance, when it comes to like core principles of SAP security, here we are looking at topics. What does an architecture look like? What is user authentication authorization? We don't need to go to cardinality and roles and profiles and single cardinal and whatever. We want to provide what kind of security controls can exist, what kind of data protection controls are existing when it comes to SAP, what kind of proprietary network security are there, what logs can you get from different SAP systems or SAP components? That's an important question that they need to be answered. What are the logs and how can I read them? And that's one of the most important questions here when it comes to actually delivering or enabling your team or your cybersecurity team when it comes to those aspects of SAP environments. Now, and finally, detection, responding, and identifying security incidents within an SAP environment. That's something that can be worked together with the cybersecurity team and SAP security team. Just watching the clock, I think I'm still good. Within NoMonkey, we have specific areas when it comes to enabling both teams. You have SAPanese 101. It's not called SAPanese 101. I just like to call it SAPanese 101 for cyber teams. When it comes to that, for even cybersecurity and SAP security teams, there's Attack and Defend 101, even though it's not called Attack and Defend 101, but to make it short a little bit when it comes to that. You can see the link there to get an overview of these courses. And finally, one important enablement when it comes to those different teams is team collaboration. Of course, we're not going to do the marigold or anything. Here, advisory has that capabilities when it comes to purple team activities. Now, what is the purple team activities? It's basically combining the red team, so those who do attacks or execute attacks and simulate attacks, with detection and building of these defenses. So you have the red and you have the blue teams, all of the different activities interacted together to create that purple team activities. Here, it's where it gets interesting. Here, it's where it gets, I understand now, what I'm able to see, what I'm not able to see, what to concentrate on with those two teams. So these activities are quite good, quite interesting. But we also want to see now how we can further relate it to what the cybersecurity teams look into, and how we can then collaborate from a process perspective as well. Excuse me. So you get the idea here around the different enablement that is provided. So enter Mitre attack. Now, I'm pretty sure that most of the participants today has heard of Mitre attack, and I like to utilize Mitre attack. It provides a lot of different good intelligence, I call, to make you create actually attack techniques, or at least enables you to think on how different tactics happen based on specific techniques. Now, these specific Mitre attack, if you don't know it, go check it out, see what it provides, see the amount of data that comes from pen testing teams, that comes from different organizations, that comes from research centers to actually produce such a source for us to use. So that is great nowadays to use. So we want to see how we can build use cases related to SOC for them to understand what is this exact specific log. And we'll start that with an example. And one example I like to start with is extracting, or at least accessing and extraction of critical tables by a malicious user. Now, you probably would, looking at that from an SAP perspective, coming from an SAP background, you understand that this is just a nightmare, right? So as you can define the problem, yes, of course, there are too many alerts that would be generated. This is just due to bad behavior or bad user behavior. They've understood to work in a specific way that is going to be very hard to change. So we try to work around it. Another part is application owners are not skilled to define specific risk around that specific table. So there are critical tables that are defined by SAP, but also there are customers that define criticality or severity to the level of fields that are existing in certain SAP tables. So that also is great, amazing work. But when it comes to business owner, or at least application owners, they're not quite equipped to do that. They don't have the time to do that. So we want to still try to find a different solution when it comes to that. Now, I'm not saying that these solutions are 100%, but they do work to some extent. And finally, just to give you an idea of how many tables there are, they are not like 80,000. I don't think they're all that critical, but to give you an idea of the amount of tables that already exist, this is by default, of course, other than the tables that you create yourself, but by default, approximately 80,000 tables exist when it comes to SAP systems. So how do we solve, detecting access and extraction of critical tables by a malicious user? One way to do it is actually to look into the extracted information that can go to different mediums or locations. Now, as I said, these correlation rules, I'm just explaining them to bring a point. You might find different areas that you can correlate with, but to give you an idea what kind of sources that we require, you can actually start correlating the extraction with any kind of blacklisted IP addresses. You can correlate that with any kind of user that had any kind of privilege changes within the last 2 or 3 minutes. These kind of changes are quite strange, or at least quite interesting to look at. But to look into blacklisted IP addresses, or to look at unauthorized mediums or physical devices, or even locations, you cannot just get it out of the application level. You still need to correlate that with your infrastructure level. And that's an important part where we can easily start correlating, or we can correlate different use cases that are coming from an application level to understand our entire story of how this attack started, or at least how a certain threat might start. So how do purple teams usually, or how does this purple team activity look like? Coming from the Mitre attack framework. As you know, the Mitre attack framework here as well adopted to an SAP environment. So there are certain techniques and tactics that are relevant directly to an SAP. If we look at a certain technique, so you can see my red line here, when it comes to, just to give you an idea, this top column here or row is tactics of Mitre attack, and these are the techniques down below here for whoever has not come across the Mitre attack. So this attack technique on a very high level here, we haven't touched it technically. We have done an active scan to compromise certain accounts. From that, we looked into valid accounts, default accounts. Some of the findings that we do during pen testings, the default accounts are still using the default passwords, which is also, it's always great. We are able to do some sort of exploitation on the client. From there, we can manipulate that client to do some sort of privilege escalation, create or modify some sort of system processes on the host. Remember, SAP is not a sandbox, so to do it from there, and then finally transform, or based on that authorization, what kind of tables or access or data that I could get my hands on, I start to transfer that. And that important part here, to actually look into that attack path, gives us an idea how we can relate this information to the SOC people. And to do that, we go back to our critical table extraction and easily, define those techniques with those different IDs. These IDs you can locate on that table that I showed you. Excuse me. On that table that I showed you. These IDs are currently used in most of SIM vendors, so also SOC teams, that they can map this specific ID to certain use cases that they have already built. And how does a purple team look into this? Is that they run through different techniques from the Mitre attack to determine what kind of activities are being recognized or are being detected from an SAP perspective on the SIM side or from the SOC department. So that's an important aspect to add. We've actually been working recently on the WASP also project, if you've not come across it, to improve that, which I'll show you shortly. So to give you an idea of the Mitre attack, different multiple events, excuse me, when it comes to SAP can definitely have the same attack IDs or technique IDs. One single event can have multiple attack IDs, which is also great because you can correlate it to multiple use cases. And of course, where your tuning is important in that part and your testing is even more important. I don't know if that's a word, but more important. Threat modeling, that's an important part, whether you take it from an infrastructure level, application level, just take it and do it cross departments. So look into those different business processes. This is a little bit when your maturity starts to grow, look into those cross department threats that you can actually create use cases or create attack vectors out of them. Unfortunately, yes, mapping needs to be done. So mapping of the Mitre attack IDs and the different logs that are coming out of the SAP needs to be done manually for now. And hopefully there's nothing out of the box, but we are working to release something soon on our OWASP for Business Application Security, which is coming soon. If you have not seen this before, you can read all about the OWASP for Business App. This is completely open source. We provide different tools and capabilities and understandings when it comes to different areas coming from a cybersecurity and in collaboration with a lot of SAP security professionals. So this coming soon, detection engineering, we don't have a proper name for it, but it is the combination of those different security audit logs with a mapping to the IDs of a Mitre attack or technique IDs. Great project, takes a lot of time. So whoever would like to contribute, don't hesitate to contact me, please. And finally, an important part where I always repeat to our customers is once you define those use cases, directly define playbooks, don't leave it out. Define workflows between roles and responsibilities, at least to that level. Test and automate and repeat to make sure that your detection capabilities hits every time a certain technique happens, or hits every time a certain attack or a defined attack happens on your SAP environment. You don't want to worry about it. You want to throw it. It's going to alert. It's going to be automated. It's going to take care of itself. Now I concentrate on advanced stuff like going threat hunting and doing proactive security stuff that enables me to define further things that I might not know about. So important improvement here on a very high level. Few minutes or just one or two slides before I open it up for questions. One final area, of course, around respond and recover. As I told you before, I would definitely create a event around, or not event, but at least a session around it. Important areas to understand, as you can see, testing is a very major part of the maturity of detection, or at least monitoring capabilities and response. So roles and responsibilities are quite also mature. So we cannot escape roles and responsibilities with a tool. We cannot escape testing with a tool. But tool can definitely help us achieve that if we have the right people there. All right. Some takeaways for you. They're not gifts, unfortunately, but they are takeaways. So when you want to identify your gaps, look into the different controls, processes, technology, follow the SOC CMM, but adopt it to your SAP environment. People enablement is quite critical. If you have the process, if you have the tool, without the right skills, you could just put that process and put that tool to, let's say, build up dust and pay for it on a yearly basis, which is also great. Derive clear roles and responsibilities in all different areas when it comes to that. Mitre attack, use it as an intelligence source. It's quite good. It's quite informative. It gives you an understanding of every technique, a description, how to mitigate it. If you look at attack or actors specifically, you can create models around of actors instead of techniques and tactics. So there's a lot of ways you could use the Mitre attack. And finally, create, test, tune, and automate, repeat. So that's an important part when it comes to maturing SAP security. An important area here where we support an advisory is that we have seen those different use cases, not just from a SOC perspective, but from different areas. Specifically, our one of the services, or one of the stuff that we address is SOC enablement, which we created around this SAP security mentorship. What we call is we work with those different teams. We provide that training throughout the service, and it's not a 10-day, it's not a 15-day service. It takes time to create maturity, it takes time to create or to mature the skills for the different teams. So that is packaged around that SAP security mentorship when it comes to what the advisory specifically does to support our customers, or to support, hopefully, you one day. Thank you very much. If you'd like to contact me, these are my details there. You can contact me directly. We have 3 minutes. Well, we can open it up for questions, and we can take the time as we go. I hope you enjoyed that. And the recording, as I said in the beginning, will be available to you guys, will be sent out to you guys accordingly, or in the next couple of days. Any questions? All right, let's see here.